Hi everyone, this is my buddy Rowan and this is my grandson Cooper. Rowan is an old man. He is about almost 14 and he's been with us ever since he was 9 weeks old. He is a real sweet dog and we love him. Thank you. Hi friends, you read chapter 1 yesterday. Today we're going to read chapters 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I'm going to start with chapter 2. Chapter 2 from Nugly, Nugget's family. Nugget had a mother, 3 brothers, and 3 sisters. That first night, all of Nugget's siblings got their names in more or less the same fashion as Nugget, which was how he wound up with 3 brothers named Biscuit, Bacon, and Frosty, and 3 sisters named Pepper, Sprite, and Cheese Fries. As far as Nugget was concerned, his mother's name was Mom, but according to those voices he'd heard earlier, she could also be referred to as Wendy, so that was interesting. Something worth mentioning here is that dogs have a dog language, which they all know how to speak from birth. Take, for example, huskies, who never shut up from the moment they are born. But when a dog loves a human, they can also understand that human's language, even if they've only just met. And those voices Nugget had been hearing were, in fact, human. They belong to the Vendicks. And Nugget loved them from the moment he met them. I think it's Vendicks. Okay. And Nugget loved them from the moment he met them. In the weeks that followed, as the puppies graduated from crawling to walking to following the Vendicks around their home, Nugget's love for his humans only grew. The Vendicks lived in Dorchester, a sprawling, tree-lined neighborhood on the south side of Boston. Specifically, they lived at 99 Ichabod Lane in a little blue house hidden behind a hydrangea hedge. Mr. Vendick was a businessman who went to work every day in a suit and tie, came home and immediately changed into jeans and a t-shirt bearing the name of some old rock band. Then he'd go to the sound system, put on a record by whatever band he was wearing that day, call out, "Wendy!" and wait patiently for Nugget's mother to lumber over so he could scratch her behind the ears while he mused on what to make for dinner that night and how much counter space he had to work with. The counters were constantly full because Mrs. Vendick was a professional baker who always filled the house with amazing smells, working on new recipes for cookies, cupcakes, and other treats. Unfortunately, she was also always placing those treats on surfaces too high for Nugget and his siblings to reach. "It's a crime," said Bacon, peering into the kitchen from around the corner. "It's an accident," said Nugget. "It has to be. If she knew how badly we wanted to eat the cupcakes, she would obviously leave them on the floor. She's a nice lady. She just doesn't know." "Ignorance of the law is no excuse," said Cheese Fries, who had discovered TV this week. "We should just tell her," Sprite said. "On 3, let's all ask her politely but firmly to reconsider her actions. 1, 2, 3. At which point, all free-roaming, opinionated puppies were promptly rounded up by Mrs. Vendick and ushered back into their nest. This happened about once a day. But no human held a higher place in Nugget's heart than Taylor Van Dyck. Taylor was 12 years old, bright-eyed, tall for her age, and an astoundingly easy girl to love. First off, she had given Nugget his name, and Nugget liked his name. And when someone gives you a gift like that, you're inclined to love them forever. On top of that, Taylor was kind and warm and quick to laugh when you licked her face, which was always a nice quality for a friend to have. But what really sealed the deal, what made Nugget feel that love so strongly it made every inch of his fur stand on end, was the pattern. Chapter 3, The Pattern. The pattern started just before spring of that year, a couple weeks into Nugget being alive. Well, possibly it had started before then. But that was when Nugget's ears started to turn from puppy ears into dog ears, capable of hearing things thousands of feet away. That was how at 3 p.m. every day he started to hear it, a slap, 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 always beginning far in the distance before quickly growing closer. And as it grew closer, it grew louder. And as it grew louder, a smell became clearer, blowing on the wind, a scent with grass stains, laughter, and vanilla. And as the smell became clearer, the sound grew faster and louder, still, until it all reached a fever pitch. Slap, 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 slam! At this point, the Van Dyck's front door would fly open. 2 objects would smack against the foyer wall like they'd been thrown at high speed, and a voice would ring out, "I missed you guys!" The pattern was the sound of Taylor Van Dyck rushing back from school, not walking, but running as fast as she possibly could, every single day, so that she could kick her Snickers off and with wild abandon and find the puppies she'd been thinking about since 7 that morning. Once she'd reached the nest in the back of the house, she would get down on the floor with them and let them know how excited she'd been all day to play. How could you not love a girl like that? It wasn't long before Taylor could tell Nugget and his siblings apart, much better than Mr. or Mrs. Van Dyck could. She knew that Biscuit had white ears and a black nose, but that Pepper had black ears and a white nose. She knew that Frosty and Bacon loved playing tug-of-war, but that, depending on who lost, Frosty would be salty and Bacon could be frosty. She knew that when Sprite got excited, she could wag her tail so hard she knocked herself over, and that somehow it was the chronically dozy cheese fries that always got caught underfoot. So you had to look out for her, and she knew that Nugget was the one who looked. Well, actually, we should probably stop and talk about how exactly Nugget looked. Chapter 4, How Nugget Looked. It would be very easy to tell you how Nugget and his siblings looked if only Nugget and his siblings had been any particular breed of dog. If they'd been Weimaraners, you could simply read the sentence, Nugget and his siblings were Weimaraners. And then go look up Weimaraner in the internet and say to yourself, oh, I see, they look like that. Or if you happen to own a Weimaraner, you could go into the living room, look at them very intently and say to yourself, yep, just as I remember. But in this case, it wasn't as simple. For one thing, Wendy was already a canine of undeterminate origin. She was a big black dog with white paws, a thick snout, and a curiously curly tail. Once the Van Dycks had a DNA test done, hoping it might tell them what kind of dog Wendy was. The woman who processed and returned the test included a note congratulating them. In all her years of canine research, she said she'd never seen a test where so many of the results were just question marks. Then there was the matter of paternity. If anyone knew the breed of the puppy's father, then they may have known at least 50% of what Nugget and company were. But no one ever knew who the father was, let alone what he looked like. The only member of the Van Dyck household who had met him was Wendy herself. And though the puppies would occasionally ask Wendy about his identity, more often than not, she would just smile a private half smile and not say a word. We'll come back to this. So Nugget and his siblings weren't Weimaraners. Or if they were only Weimaraners, the same way a hot fudge sundae is only maraschino cherries. There's a little bit of that ingredient in there, yes, but there's also a whole lot of everything else. So it's going to require a bit more effort to tell you how Nugget looked. One easy way to describe a dog's appearance is often its size, but given that he was a puppy, Nugget's size was less of a fixed fact and more of an ongoing news story with frequent and frequently baffling updates. It was anyone's guess as to whether the puppies would end up being as big as their mother or twice as big or half her size. Some of them were growing faster than the others. Pepper, in particular, was really going for it, and her rapid growth made her the envy of her siblings, one and all. Nugget, though, was growing slowly compared to his siblings. With a couple notable exceptions, Nugget's years appear to have made a private agreement early on, and they would race each other to see which of them could grow bigger faster. Failing that, they would team up against the rest of Nugget's body and make a dash to outgrow the whole package. So we have our first rough sketch of Nugget, a tiny, inquiring face framed by two large, silky soft ears that, if Nugget had ran fast enough, threatened to send him tumbling over his similarly outsized paws by flopping up and down over his deep brown eyes. Which brings us to another trait, coloration. As previously discussed, Wendy was black with white paws, and Pepper and Biscuit carried on proudly in their mother's likeness, mixing up black and white in a furry free-for-all of spots and specks. From there, things grew gradually less easy to keep track of. Frosty was almost entirely white, with a black spot that seemed to be growing. Sprite was almost entirely black, with a white spot that seemed to be shrinking. Bacon's and cheese fries' black spots were outlined by streaks of russet red that had to have come from either their mysterious father or some long-forgotten red wolf forefather. And by the time you got to Nugget, any sort of strict color scheme had fallen apart altogether. Everything from Nugget's giant ears to the tip of his tail was an eye-catching explosion of black, white, orange, dark orangey red, light reddish orange, and, in the case of one streak that ran down the middle of Nugget's nose, brown, a rich, radiant shade that shone in a sunset's light and brought out the beautiful brown in Nugget's eye. Okay, we're getting closer. Brown eyes speaking out from behind big ears, on top of big paws, surrounded by coronas of color. You now almost know what Nugget looked like, but there is more to knowing someone's appearance than knowing how they look. There is also the matter of how they appear. For example, Nugget's eyes may have looked brown, but they appeared inquisitive, curious, always looking up at what his mother or the Van Dycks were doing. All the better for him to learn how to do it too, how to help, how to show that people he loved, that he wanted to be just like them. Nugget may have looked small, but he appeared mighty, energized and animated by an excitement for everything around him that caused his paws to bounce clear off the ground and inspired his hind quarters to wag back and forth so fast his tail began to either look nor appear like anything so much as a colorful blur. And Nugget may have looked like any particular breed previously recorded in anyone's particular breed book, but he did appear to be one specific thing, a thing he was reminded of over and over in his first few weeks of life, a thing he'd been hearing since the same breath in which he'd been given his very name. Because according to all available experts on the subject, Nugget was cute. Taylor Van Dyck had cried it out involuntarily when Nugget was born. Dr. Schindberg, the veterinarian, had said it in a laugh when Nugget was wriggled and sneezed at his first vaccinations. And either one or both of the Van Dyck parents had said it the day Nugget had first ventured out onto the front porch. It was hard to remember who had said it first that day. In that moment, Nugget had been a little overstimulated. Walking was a relatively new concept at that point. And while he'd pieced together the basic concept of the outdoors from various glimpses and smells, it was still more of a theory to Nugget than a practice. On top of all of that, the hydrangea hedge was in full bloom that week. And when the sweet smell of those gigantic flowers first crashed into him, it was with a force that knocked Nugget onto his back. As the Van Dycks wiped tears of laughter from their eyes, Nugget wiggled all four paws in the air and waggled his tail furiously, looking for all the world like a deliriously happy, overturned turtle. And all the while there was that oft-heard word, cute. "That's what breed you are, Nugget," Mrs. Van Dyck had announced once she'd bent down and helped flip Nugget the right way up again. "Cute. Your breed is just cute." And the other Van Dycks had nodded and smiled and agreed never to bring up the question of breed again. Not that it had ever really mattered, but in any case, now it had been decisively solved. Up till then, Nugget had never particularly cared what he looked like. Neither had he intentionally gone out of his way to be considered cute. But something fell into place in those moments. It was good, Nugget decided, to be cute. It made people happy, and that made Nugget happy, and therefore it could only be good. And soon enough, Taylor realized that this was something that set Nugget apart from his siblings, his desire to be told when he was being cute. Every time it happened, Nugget would light up with delight and hurled himself into Taylor's lap to celebrate, which she of course loved. which, of course, only inspired her to call him cute again. It would even have been tempting to say it was Nugget's favorite thing in the world, but it wasn't. Taylor knew, and all Nugget's family knew, that his favorite thing in the world was just to spend time with his family. Cute was nice, but at the end of the day, Nugget was happy simply to have a friend who made room in her busy 12-year-old schedule to spend time with him. Time with the people he loved was the greatest gift Nugget could get. Oh, I want to read that again. Time with the people he loved was the greatest gift Nugget could get. He didn't know this yet, but he would not get much more time at all. Not with these people, anyway. So it was nice that he was getting it now at least. Sorry. Chapter 5. That thing we said we'd come back to. Nugget's time with the Van Dycks was almost up. But first, one more happy memory and one more note on family. Most days, Nugget didn't particularly think about his father or lack thereof. With 7 canine family members and 3 humans to keep track of, Nugget already had more family under one roof than many humans or dogs ever did. So some days you just couldn't not think about it. Some days you'd catch a strong smell on the wind and run to the front door to see a glimpse of not 1 but 2 dogs walking past, their same but slightly different scents just screaming, father and son, and then over the sound of Sprite yelling, "Hi, hi, hi, we're here in the house, hi, hi, can you hear me? I'll speak louder, hi!" Mrs. Van Dyck would say, "Oh, there go the Ellsworths, walking Buster and Buster Jr. Aren't they cute?" And Mr. Van Dyck would mutter, "Yeah, though they could have been more creative with the names." And Sprite would continue, "Hi, hi, hi. Oh, they're gone. That's okay. We'll talk next time." Other times, Taylor would come down from her room just before dinner, her normally bright eyes swollen up with tears, devastated by a conversation with a classmate that hadn't gone the way she expected it to, or by the ending of a book that very much had gone the way she expected it to, but had still made her terribly sad. On days like those, Mr. Van Dyck would drop whatever dinner plans he'd been working on, even if he'd already chopped up all the vegetables. He would put them away and tear open a little blue box of bright yellow mac and cheese. Then he would let Taylor stir the cheese into the pot while she talked about whatever had happened that day, or else just leaned on her father's shoulder and didn't talk at all, as Nugget and any number of his siblings tossed and tumbled around Taylor's ankles, imploring her not to be sad, to remember she was loved, and to maybe, while she was at it, possibly find it in her heart to drop a few pieces of cheese. On days like those, Nugget couldn't help it. He wondered what it would be like to have a father. He tried not to let it worry him, but it was a big question, and Nugget still had a small body, and while his body was still growing, some days the question grew faster. Until finally, when Nugget was 8 or 9 weeks old, he couldn't keep it inside anymore and went in search of answers. Answers would found lying in front of a food bowl marked Wendy, contentedly munching on a mouthful of kibble. "Hey, Mom," Nugget said, "can I ask a question?" Wendy didn't get up, but she did finish her chewing, swallow her food, and smile her soft half smile. "Not only can you ask a question," she said, "you just did." That made Nugget laugh. Then he remembered how big his question was and grew serious again. Okay, he said. Well, I just wanted to know. I was wondering. That is, I thought. Nugget stopped again. For a moment, it looked like Wendy was going to take another bite of food to give Nugget time to think. And that made him blurt his words out as fast as he could, just to get it over with. It is weird that I don't have a dad. Would it be a complete family if we had a dad, a mom and a dad, like how Taylor had Mr. and Mrs. Van Dyke? Instantly, Nugget felt silly. He didn't want to seem ungrateful for everything his mother did for him and his siblings. For the past 2 months, she had fed them, cleaned them, and kept them cuddled close at night. Nugget knew that he had an incredible mom, and he hoped his question in no way suggested otherwise. But to her credit, Wendy considered the question seriously. She laid her head down on one paw before taking a moment to try out the other. Finally, after a few moments' solemn contemplation, she raised her head back up to look right at Nugget. Yes, she said, we would be a complete family, but we're also a complete family now. Family isn't a checklist you have to cross off. It's just the people you choose who choose you back. And then, with a speed that belied her large and gentle nature, Wendy leaped up and pinned a squealing Nugget to the floor. And she said, licking over Nugget's helpless laughter, am so glad you chose me so that I got to choose you back. For such a big conversation, it happened surprisingly quick. But like many things that happen quickly, it shaped the rest of Nugget's life. From that day forward, Nugget knew that his family didn't have to look like any one thing, because family was who he chose. Like when he chose to cheer up Taylor after a bad day, or when Mrs. Van Dyke chose to let him have, just one mini cupcake made with dog-safe ingredients. And so those became the pillars of Nugget's young life, choosing his family and trusting they would choose him back. But just as a backup policy, just to really up the odds that they always would choose him back, Nugget always made sure to be very, very cute. All right, that was the one more happy memory. Now for the unhappy one. Chapter 6, and this is the last chapter of today. One day, Mrs. Van Dyke was working on a new batch of mini donuts. Most of the puppies were running around the backyard, engaging in a diplomatic skirmish with the family of squirrels next door. Nugget, however, was inside. He sat in the kitchen, staring closely at Mrs. Van Dyke's every move. He was testing out an unfounded but optimistic theory that mini donuts might be meant for mini dogs. This was why Nugget was there to see Mrs. Van Dyke get the phone call. Hey, how are you? She said. Then, okay, and then, right, and then, I know, I guess I just, right, okay, I love you, see you soon. Mrs. Van Dyke hung up the phone, leaned on the counter, and joined Nugget in staring at her mini donuts. She did this for several minutes. Then she promptly set about doubling the size of her batch. When Taylor returned from school that day, Mrs. Van Dyke tried to get her attention, but Taylor, sprinting with the winged ankles of the pattern, just waved at her mother and chirped, Hi, Mom, can't talk, puppy's outside, hi, Nugget, bye, Mom. At which point she disappeared again out the back door, leaving Mrs. Van Dyck alone in the kitchen with Nugget and a small mountain range of mini donuts. Mr. Van Dyck came home from work shortly after that, but he did not change into a t-shirt. He went to the kitchen, but he didn't start opening cookbooks or chopping up vegetables or even clearing up counter space amid the now frankly alarming amount of baked goods. He just went straight to the pantry and got out the little blue box. As far as Nugget was concerned, this was shaping up to be a great day. Taylor was about to get her favorite comfort food, and she didn't even seem to need any comforting. And at least one of those donuts had to be headed for the floor sooner or later, right? When Taylor came in from the backyard and lit up at the smell of mac and cheese, her joy seemed to confirm Nugget's feelings. It was a banner day in the Van Dyck household. But, with a sigh, Mr. Van Dyck gave Taylor her bowl of mac and cheese and asked her to sit at the table. "I've been offered a new position at work," Mr. Van Dyck said, once all three humans and at least one canine onlooker were seated. Taylor, who had been dropping some extra Monterey Jack into her bowl, looked up and beamed. "You got the promotion you wanted?" she asked. "That's great!" Mr. and Mrs. Van Dyck looked at each other. "Yes," said Mr. Van Dyck, "it is. I've wanted this for a long time, and I honestly didn't even expect to get it, but the position, it's in San Francisco." The table fell silent, except for the squishy sounds of Taylor stirring her mac and cheese, pulling out a steaming spoonful, taking a bite, and chewing thoughtfully. Her parents studied her. Nugget studied her spoon. At last, Taylor swallowed. "So we're moving," she said. "Yes," said Mrs. Van Dyck. You'll be able to finish the school year, but we'll need to leave pretty quickly after that." "We're so sorry, Taylor. We know you love your friends here, But Taylor held up a hand. "No," she said. No, you don't have to be sorry. Dad said this might happen last spring, and I've had a lot of time to think about it. And honestly, the timing couldn't be better. Most of my friends are going to a different high school than me next year anyway. If I'm going to have to make new friends, I might as well do it somewhere cool. And San Francisco? Come on, that's so cool. Way to go, Dad. Mr. and Mrs. Van Dyck looked at each other again. This time, though, their shared expression had changed from dread to pleasant astonishment. "That's an incredibly mature attitude to take," said Mrs. Van Dyck. "How did we get so lucky?" Mr. Van Dyck added, grinning with relief. "And, Taylor, if you want to talk about this further in any way, we'll absolutely be here for you. But gosh, you really are just an incredible kid, huh?" "So true," Taylor agreed through a mouthful of pasta. "I'm always washing things. She's..." The Van Dycks laughed, buoyed by their contagious joy. Nugget wagged his tail back and forth across the tile floor. This caused Taylor to look down at him, which caused her smile to light up even brighter. "And just think," she said, "the puppies are going to love it." The room fell silent again. Taylor looked back at her parents. They were no longer smiling, and the pillars of Nugget's world came tumbling down. We will read chapter 7 tomorrow, but I wonder if you can kind of guess why it ended in kind of a bad spot. Taylor's happy to go to San Francisco, but when she looked at the puppies, something else is happening. I wonder if you can think about what could be coming next. But tomorrow, we go to chapter 7, and we might get some answers. Thank you for reading with me.